headlines now. The tenure of the current Chief Justice, Mogoeng Mogoeng, comes to an end in 2021. South Africa has never had a woman Chief Justice, so it is time to consider, or is it time to consider, a female Chief Justice? Joining me to talk about this is Research and Advocacy Officer at Judges Matter, Zikhona Ndlebe. Zikhona, good evening, and thank you for joining us on the Newsfeed Late Night.
Good evening.
Talk to me then about the timeliness of having this conversation. I know you've been writing articles as Judges Matters on the process, on the various candidates, and why we should be looking at this time.
Well, Thabo, we have never had a female Chief Justice before, and we are asking the question, is it not about time that we consider that we have a female Chief Justice, considering that the tenure of the current Chief Justice, Mogoeng Mogoeng, is coming to an end in 2021. So that is the question that we are asking. Obviously, it's the appointment of the next Chief Justice will not solely be based on gender. It will also be based on the provisions of Section 174 of the Constitution, which is that the Chief Justice must be, or any judge must be appropriately qualified and must be a fit and proper person. But Section 174 of the Constitution also makes provision for a consideration for the need of a judiciary that reflects broadly on the racial and gender composition of South Africa. So that is the question that we're asking at this point in time. Does South Africa not think it's the appropriate time to have a female Chief Justice, considering that in the past we've never had a female Chief Justice?
Now, considering the important role of a Chief Justice, there are some quarters that have actually downright made that call. In fact, the Deputy SG of the ANC, Justice Duarte, has said the next Chief Justice should be a woman. On what basis should we make that decision of it being a woman, of the Chief Justice being a woman?
Thabo, it should not, as I said, it should not be only about whether the next Chief Justice is a female or not. But we must look at whether the candidate is fit and proper, is appropriately qualified, and has characteristics, leadership skills, for example, such as, for example, if you look at the article that we wrote, if you look at President Maya, she is the current president of the Supreme Court of Appeal. She has the necessary leadership skills. And so there are various things that one has to consider. And for example, a Chief Justice does not only head the judiciary as a whole, but also heads the Constitutional Court. And as a result, a Chief Justice must be a strong administrator, must be able to communicate effectively with other arms of a government. So there are various characteristics that a Chief Justice must have. But the question that we're asking, maybe it's about time that you consider having a female Chief Justice. But that will not be the only consideration that should be looked at. A Chief Justice or a judge must be appropriately qualified and must be a fit and proper person to hold the office of a judge or a Chief Justice in this case.
I suppose the question arises purely because we have not had a female Chief Justice since the advent of democracy in South Africa. And so then the next question would be, what has been the challenge keeping us from having a female Chief Justice?
Obviously, the first challenge has been our history. So previously, female people were not afforded platforms such as becoming Chief Justices, judges, and considering our history, it has been very difficult to move from the norms of the past. So that has been the main challenge, and obviously another challenge is because of the criteria that is provided for in Section 174 of the Constitution, an appropriately qualified person, a fit and proper person. So those, especially an appropriately qualified person, the main issue has been the history of South Africa. But that is not to say that there have not been people in the past that would have held the position, but the problem has been the history of South Africa.
Now, in light of that history of women being marginalized within the legal profession, are those challenges continuing today? What's the environment like?
Well, those challenges are still there, but because we are in a transformation phase at this point in time, those are challenges that are being overcome step by step.
Now, the appointment itself, apart from being, as you put it, a symbolic gesture of enormous importance, what are the other added benefits that a female Chief Justice would bring to that role?
So, a female Chief Justice, as the article of Jessie Duarte, it would be a very strong statement of transformation. If we were to have a female Chief Justice in South Africa for the first time in our country, it would be a very strong statement to the general public, to young girls that are still growing up, and to the legal fraternity as well, that we are moving away from the marginalization of women in our country, and we are in the process of transforming. And it's not only words in the Constitution, but it will be seen to be done that transformation is taking place.
Now, you've added to your article some of the qualities the candidates would need to have, which include some of those which you've already mentioned. I mean, intellectual leadership, a profound understanding of the judiciary, and being able to lead and manage and be able to communicate with government, etc., etc. But you also talk about the Chief Justice must be technologically savvy. Why do you choose to highlight that particular attribute?
That is correct, Thabo. So as we are in lockdown, we're still currently in lockdown, and if you've noted in the previous months, there's been a challenge in our courts, because the norm has been that cases are heard in person. And considering COVID-19, cases had to be heard virtually. And there were some concerns in various courts that some judges are not technologically savvy. As a result, cases could not be heard at all, because it was not possible for some judges to preside over cases virtually. But we've had courts such as the Supreme Court of Appeal, where cases were heard virtually and business continued as per normal, but cases were heard virtually. So we need a Chief Justice and judges that are able to adapt with times, and judges that are able to that are technologically savvy, because what if you find ourselves, God forbid, in a situation that technology is the only platform where cases would be heard?
Right. Now, Zikhona, you've handpicked a couple. Of course, this list, as you put it, is not exhaustive. Justice Mandisa Maya is one of them. Just take me through some of the others that you have picked, and what are the particular qualities that you picked up from them as potential candidates?
Okay, so as I've mentioned that strong leadership skills are very important as well for the position of the Chief Justice, because the Chief Justice does not only lead the judiciary, but the Chief Justice leads the Constitutional Court as well. So we've mentioned Justice Mandisa Maya, who is the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal. We've mentioned Justice Nongosi Mhlanhla, who was appointed to the Constitutional Court in 2015, and she has experience. She has served as a justice at the Supreme Court of Appeal from 2009 until her appointment in 2015 to the Constitutional Court. So she has the necessary experience, and we would say that she has leadership skills as well. And we've also mentioned Justice Leona Theron, who was appointed to the Constitutional Court in 2017. Obviously, it's still early days. She was appointed only in 2017, some would say. But she is technologically savvy, and she displayed those skills during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the Constitutional Court moved to virtual hearings, and she assumed the role of the coordinator of the Constitutional Court for virtual hearings. And we've also mentioned Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng. She is one of the candidates that should be watched out for, because it seems as though she is building a profile towards becoming a Chief Justice. And all of these justices have penned down good judgments and have heard cases that had an impact on our legal fraternity.
All right, Zikhona Ndlebe, much appreciated, and thank you for joining us, Research and Advocacy Officer at Judges Matter.